Hello everybody, this is Sam Shankland again, and I'm going to continue my short series on building an opening repertoire. So in the last lecture we talked about sort of creating the foundation for your opening repertoire, and basically how to do it by looking at these top level games and trying to test them out, look at some of the openings on your own, or play some speed games or long games in these openings, and even if it costs you some tough losses, then in the long run, it will really pay off in the future. However, there's also another part of creating an opening repertoire, and that's that if you're too narrow-minded in your openings, then you can often run into trouble. For example, I used to exclusively play the Slav defense against d4. So if white prepared this really well, he could go into a variation that I didn't know too well. So for example, I would play it like so, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, d takes c4. And if white played it, and then a4, bishop f5, and if white looked up knight e5 and looked it up really well and figured out a way to get a comfortable, playable slight advantage, then he probably would have good prospects for winning the game. And I ran into trouble with knight e5 and also e3, games against Grandmaster Larry Christensen and Grandmaster Luke Van Whaley. I ran into some trouble with this strategy. So I think while in general it's always good to have, a sort of core set of openings that you really try out, it's also good to be able to have side variations that you play as well. For example, now I'm learning the Grunfeld defense against d4. I don't foresee it becoming my main opening, but I think that having it as an extra is not going to hurt, because in some spots where somebody prepares really well for the Slav, especially if they're normally an e4 player and they play d4, if suddenly, I see d4 and I'm thinking this is really strange, I realize they probably prepared something against my Slav. And, since I'm also completely capable of playing the Grunfeld, maybe this time I will play the Grunfeld. So that's something that you should usually be able to do if your openings are a little bit vulnerable. In the previous video, I mentioned my friend Josh Friedel and how he always plays the Roy Lopez as black. However, one thing to know about this is that in this position he can play the Berlin as well with knight f6. After a6, bishop c5, or bishop a4, knight f6, castles, he's capable of playing the Archangel with bishop b3, bishop c5. And when he's after bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3, castle, he's also capable here of playing the Marshal. And there's lots of different, it's all very similar positions and similar ideas, similar middle games that he'll be very comfortable with because he understands the themes and he's played against a lot of the different white tries to get an advantage. He's okay playing all these different variations, and they share a lot of similar aspects. And that's part of what makes his repertoire so strong, is that he can play many different systems in the Roy Lopez. So for example, me, I'm a Najdorf player, which is a bit sharper. It's a different opening. And let's say we look at white playing bishop g5, e6, or sorry, not e5, e6, f4, bishop e7, queen f3, queen c7, castle. I'm capable of playing various different tries. This is my main thing, where I play knight b7, and if g4, b5, bishop f6, knight f6, g5, knight d7, f5, I play this sort of, I guess, quote-unquote sideline, bishop takes g5 check. Now, I'm also capable of doing other stuff. I can play the main lines, where in this position after f5, I play knight c5. I'm capable of doing this as well. I'm also capable of a sort of funky-looking move in this position, g takes f6, which I think is extremely underrated. It's been played successfully by some great players. I remember Judith Polgar beat another high 2600, Alexander Moiseev, with this line one time. And I think that there's a lot to there's a lot of inherent value in being able to play a variation like this one as well as the main line that I play. I'm also capable of playing queen c7, and after bishop f6, gf6, just transposing into sort of a Richter-Rauser structure. And so while I have the Najdorf, if somebody prepares for me, I have side variations within the Najdorf itself that I can play, sort of like my friend Josh does in the Roy Lopez. So there's lots of ways that you can keep yourself prepared. But another thing you can do is have just a total other opening that you can play. Like, I know there's a very strong grandmaster, Georgi Kachishvili. After e4, he usually plays c6. He plays the Caro-Kann, and he plays it very well. But now and then, he is capable of playing c5, and he will play a classical Sicilian or a hyper-accelerated dragon. And while the hyper-accelerated dragon, personally, I don't believe too much in, he played against me once and made me kind of look like an idiot because he killed me so badly. And the classical Sicilian is definitely an opening that checks out. It's not refuted in any way. It's a fine opening. I've been known to play it myself now and then. It starts like this, and if Black plays it correctly, he'll get good winning chances in a sharp position. And this is just another opening that you can choose. And if you have one repertoire and you're really very loyal to your openings and you don't ever play anything else, then you may become vulnerable. But I think having, for me, if I'm a Najdorf player against e4, if I play the Najdorf 85 or 90% of the time, that's, an excellent percentage. Because now and then, if I drop the classical on somebody, I'm happy. Like, for example, I recently had a game with Alexander Strupinsky, and the beginning of this game should be extremely instructive. So he plays e4, which he normally plays, and I play c5, which I normally play. Now here, Strupinsky has played a lot of different anti-Sicilians, but he's never been one to really play the open Sicilian. He's played c3, he's played d3, he's played knight f3, he's played knight c3, but he's never really been one to play the open Sicilians very well. So he played a funny move here, knight e2. And so I thought about this move for a while. I thought, he can transpose here into the open Sicilian, but he's probably looked at some of my games and realized that I'm mostly a Najdorf player. So if I play d6, he will probably play g3, and then play bishop g2, c3, d4, and play for his anti-Sicilian setup, which he's going to be very good at. But I also can play the classical Sicilian, which he probably hasn't seen too many games of mine in, but maybe he saw that it was possible. So I play knight c6. And now if he plays g3, then I think Black's basically already better, because after knight f6, bishop g2, Black can quickly throw d5 at White. Okay, better, maybe an overstatement, but I think Black has already comfortably solved all his problems. The same thing could happen if White now plays like c3, like he could in the other position. Now knight f6, and if d3, d5. Black quickly plays d5. The point is he doesn't have to waste a move playing d6 like he would if, he was going to play the Najdorf. If I tried to play the Najdorf here and White plays g3, knight f6, bishop g2, knight c6, let's say c3, I could play d5 now, but I'm losing a tempo, and this probably is not favorable. Or maybe White will castle first. And let's say it's hard to see what Black's going to do now. g6, let's say c3. If I play d5, I lose a tempo, which I don't want to do. So that's basically why I decided to play knight c6 in the game. And then when Strupinsky played d4, I felt completely at home playing a classical Sicilian. So while this isn't my main opening, I still know it, and I knew some theory in it, and he didn't know too much about it. And even here, while I played the classical Sicilian a couple times, I've played it different ways. Like there's bishop g5, e6, queen d2. So in the most of the games I've played in this line, I played bishop e7, castle, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, castle. And I play these kinds of positions where Black plays queen a5, and it's a sharp struggle, but I think maybe White's slightly better. There's a lot to know here, though. But I'm also capable of playing a classical Sicilian another way, which I did in this game. I played a6, castle, bishop d7. So I'm kind of delaying, mobilizing my forces to see what he's going to do. And he plays f4, and now I play h6, attacking the bishop, bishop h4, and right away I have this move, knight takes e4, which I think is very strong. And, well, if White knows exactly what he's doing, he gets a slight advantage here, but it's very easy for White to mess up. For example, if bishop takes d8, knight takes d2, this just works out for black. He's going to be up a pawn and have probably, which is close to winning position. If white plays knight takes e4, queen takes h4, white can try knight c6, bishop c6, knight d6, but he's definitely going to be worse now in this situation because after rook d8, white either has to take this and go into an endgame where he's going to have trouble developing his pieces because of the weakness of the g2 pawn. So, for example, rook g1, g5 is a strong move, and if takes, this pawn is now weak, and black's going to have a nice central pawn majority that can push through. And it's likely that, white will maybe have a passed pawn on h2 and on c2 against two passed pawns, connected passers of black, which are more dangerous. And if white plays g3 here, well, little changes after rook g8, he has to take this pawn. Except now h2 is even weaker. So that's one thing that could happen. Or I think this knight takes c6 is a bad move for white there. White should play knight f3. But after queen e7, knight d6, queen d6, queen d6, bishop d6, rook d6, king e7, say rook d2, rook h d8. I think black's totally fine. He's going to solve all his problems without any issues here. He'll be able to sort of like reorganize his pieces. He'll trade off the rooks with bishop e8, and he'll easily equalize. So in the game, Stravinsky played the best move, which is queen e1, which now attacks the knight again and defends the bishop. Black must retreat, knight f6, and now he plays knight f5, which attacks this d6 pawn. And it's hard to see what black's going to do about it. Because there's something like queen c7, then bishop f6, g f6, and knight d5 looks extremely dangerous. And this wasn't exactly what black is looking for. So in the game, I played queen a5. I'm still in opening theory. I know what I'm doing. Bishop d6, knight d6, bishop d6, rook d6, and castle queenside. And while an opening theory is basically close to ending, Stravinsky had probably used 30 or 40 minutes on his clock by now because he didn't quite know what was going on. But I was still in opening theory. I knew this position. I'd have this position on my computer. And right away, Stravinsky made a mistake by playing bishop g3 when I think rook d2 is the best move. And after bishop g3, I quickly played knight e7. And now my plan is to play bishop c6, which will get this bishop to an excellent diagonal, harassing white's pieces. It will trade off white's good rook and take control of the d-file, and it's preparing knight f5. And I think black already has some advantage. And Stravinsky played very well and ended up actually slightly better at the end, but it was a draw. But I think that it shows that in this case, my opening idea of playing something that I don't normally play most of the time, but still have as a side variation, really shone through and it served me well in this game. So you can still surprise your opponents without making it obvious that you're going to surprise them. And there's definitely some inherent value in that. For example, when I played c5, he probably wasn't expecting a surprise. If I'd played, let's say, e5 or e6, both moves I've played before, recently actually, he would realize, something's going on. Sam has probably prepared something for me. But after c5, he's thinking, this is just normal stuff. And then knight e2, he probably still was, maybe not expecting, but was at least prepared for a classical Sicilian. But then once I played a6, he was probably, now at this point, he probably didn't quite know what was going on. And at this point, this is where the shot came in on move 7, and he's already committed himself to something that he might not know too well and is very sharp, which is a bad combination. So I think that it's important to be able to surprise your opponents with, it doesn't even have to be a new opening, it can just be a different variation in the same opening, because oftentimes openings will have many variations. Like when someone says, well, I play the Roy Lopez, I say, well, what does that mean? Is that the Chigorin, the Marshall, the whatever the other stuff is? I don't know all the names, but like the graph system, there's so many parts of the Roy Lopez, the Archangel, the Berlin, that that when you say I could play the Roy Lopez, it doesn't say very much. So if you're, let's say, normally a graph system player, like I know Grandmaster Julio Becerra plays the graph system very well. I guess I'll just quickly show what the graph system is. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle, bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3, d6, c3, castle h3, or no, castle h3, knight a5, bishop c2, c5, d4, and then this funky move knight d7 with the idea of playing e takes d4, c takes d4, and then knight c6. And hopefully you will have committed white's knight to d2 before this happens, so white can't play knight c3. So this is the graph system, and Becerra plays it, and he plays it very well. But let's say he normally plays that, but then in this game he decides to play something else. Let's say he decides to play the Marshal. Here, if white plays c3, he'll play d5. And, white could prepare the graph system, which is a sharp opening, all he wants, but he's still going to be in unfamiliar territory, and he won't understand that anything is going on until 8 moves into the game, when he's really committed himself to playing a certain way. So this would be, I think, probably a good surprise weapon. And, of course, there's tons of other ways in the Roy Lopez that one can surprise, And in openings like the Najdorf that I play, there's ways you can surprise somebody on move 25 even, if they... Or that might be a little bit late because they probably will already have their preparation or their surprise for you ready if you suspect that. But for example, against in the Najdorf, d4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, bishop e3, I always play e6 in this position. I think it's a fine move. I think black gets an okay position. But if white has never really played bishop e3 before, and he does this game, I'm thinking, well, he probably prepared something as knight e6, which is a sharp variation. And if he has some sort of offbeat sideline that's going to be hard to deal with in practical terms, then maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And here I might play one of the other two moves, e5, which is the most common move, or knight g4, which also is not bad at all. And white probably won't really know what to do now. So I think that it's important to be able to surprise your opponents, but you don't even need to learn a new opening. You can just keep with the same one, but be able to pull off a different sub-variation of that opening so that you can give your opponents some nasty shocks. So I think that another idea, if you want to think about surprises, is really make sure that they won't know it's coming early on in the game. Again, if I play e6 here, like I did in a recent game against Ray Robson, Ray is a strong young player, and he has his theory extremely well prepared, so he didn't even care. He just, went for my surprise, and, he still had it prepared anyway. He knew, even though I hadn't seen any games of his in the database, he knew exactly what to do, and he got a very good position. In fact, he was almost winning by the time his preparation was over, and he had to play on his own. There's an inherent value, he might say, for example, d4, d5, he might say, okay, if knight c3, that's what I normally play, he might have something in mind, but I've been able to play knight d2 before, I'll play knight d2. Or he could even go farther along, knight c3, bishop b4, playing for a win over, c5, knight e7, a3, takes, c5. He might say, well, Sam has probably prepared something in the poison pawn variation. Maybe he's, after queen g4, he's got some stupid knight g6 or knight f5. Maybe he's going to have something in the poison pawn, which is what was true. Maybe I'll just play a4 here and play for another kind of position, or h4, which is another move. There's lots of things that can be tried here to get your opponent out of their preparation that you probably still feel somewhat comfortable in, because even if it's not exactly the position you play, it probably still has some similar ideas. Like in this case, it has the similar idea of mess white up on the king side by playing h5, h6 in this case, instead of queen g4. So there's lots of ways that you can deal with surprises as well. But mostly it's important, if you're going to surprise somebody, you want to be able to feel comfortable with the position you're going to have in front of you. And this doesn't just necessarily mean, put it into the computer and see what it says, but look over some games played in this position by really top players. And you don't even need to go through them slowly or anything. You can go through them at, let's say, a move every second, and you sort of see ideas that are played. Like, for example, if, in the case I was looking at before, if e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, bishop e3, e5. Well, this was the most popular opening in chess for about 2 years, I think. there's still ways that I could look at it and some top games in these lines and say, okay, what are some of Black's key ideas? Black will play bishop e7. He'll play bishop e7, he'll castle. Maybe he's going to try to play queen c7, rook c8, and then play for d5. Maybe he'll play b5, b4. Maybe he'll play a5, a4. Maybe he'll play a5 and then knight a6 into c7 so we can pair d5 again. There's lots of different ideas. As you can see, I've just made a total mess out of the arrows here. There's a ton of things that that will happen. So if I know a lot of those ideas, and I say, okay, what are White's ideas? White's going to play, he's going to play f3, g4, g5. That way to get more control of this d5 source, he can put a knight there. When the bishop takes, he takes back with a pawn to open up his bishop to be able to harass the king side. Then he plays h4, h5. And, you see a lot of White's ideas. He castles on the queen side, and then he puts his knight on a5 to stop if Black plays b5 again, White plays knight a5 to stop a lot of stuff. There's so many things that can go on. Then the knight on a5 goes to c6 with this pawn on d5. There's a lot of ideas, but if you know some of these plans, you can hopefully make something of the position that's not just a mess out of these arrows. So, for example, after bishop e6, f3, it's a little relief for you. You don't have to look at that ugliness anymore. Bishop e7, queen d2, castle. Let's say I'm thinking, I kind of like this idea of playing a5. I'll play queen c7 now. And then g4, I play rook c8. And now if g5, let's say I play knight h5. This is another idea that I failed to mention. We block the pawns and we attack this guy. And let's say, now king b1. Maybe I'll play a5, trying to play a4. And if White plays a4 himself, I'll play knight a6 and play knight b4. So these are things that you don't have to know specific moves. You just have to know sort of the moves that a good player will try to play, like the ideas of playing, a5 and then knight a6. Or if we went to more of a mainline kind of thing in this opening, we could play knight bd7, g4, and then b5, g5, b4 is a main idea. I mean, there's lots of things, but you have to look at the games, not necessarily the moves exactly. You don't need to open up your openings book and say, well, in this position, Black should play b4, and if White plays knight d5, Black should take with the knight and play bishop f5. You just have to understand the moves that the top players play, and then you can come up with good moves over the board. So I think it's most important, if you're going to play a new opening, to just understand the middle games you're going to get into, because if you're going to play something new, it's unlikely you're going to get completely killed because you will know the sharpest lines pretty well. Because that's the most important part of surprising somebody. If they play right into the sharpest line, you have to know what you're doing, because if you go into a really sharp variation and you don't know what you're doing, I mean, I don't know about you, but personally, I don't like my chances playing against a 3100, aka Ribka, for a few moves in a very sharp position. That seems like it's not going to be boding well for my survival. So I think that it's important to be able to get past that phase and be able to make their opponent think on their own. And that's why surprising somebody can come in handy. But when you surprise somebody, you've got to realize they might realize what you're up to and try to get you right back. And this is why I think it's always a good idea to make it look like your surprise isn't coming. So, for example, White could go 6 moves into the game and play bishop e3, which is his, I guess, plan for me. And he basically has committed himself to a certain kind of position. And at this point, he probably isn't suspecting anything's up. Now, let's say I'm sitting at the board and I think for about 2 minutes. He knows I'm still in opening theory. He knows I still know what I'm doing. But he might get uneasy, and I could see his reaction at the table. If he's looking like, I'm kind of uncomfortable, then I'll probably play e5 and say, or knight g4. And, it's going to be tough for him to deal with practically, because I will have turned his surprise on its head and countered with a surprise of my own, and it will be hard for him he's going to be the one that has to react instead of me, and I'm probably going to have more experience in these positions than he does, because he doesn't play bishop e3. So that's basically the bones of surprising somebody. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is being able to make your repertoire stand for a very long time. And I think the best way to practice your repertoire and really improve it is to play training games. Some slow, some fast. I personally try to average about 100 blitz games, like game in 5 minute or game in 3 minute every month, which doesn't come down to too much time. You think about it, if you call each game, let's say, 6 minutes. We have 600 minutes. That's how many hours? That's 10 hours a month. That's what, 20 minutes a day about? It's not very much, but on average, if you can do that, you'll keep your openings sharp and you'll be able to improve that repertoire and get experience with some of these middle game ideas, even if they only come in quick games. And of course, long games are great too. I try to play training games. I have a training partner that I used to play with last summer a lot, about a year ago, Dennis Shmilov, who I thought was very helpful. And I think we both improved a lot as a result of playing longer training games. Game in 90 or 90-30. So we got 30 seconds after every move, and we got 90 minutes for the whole game. It's really long, almost like a tournament game, and I would treat it very seriously. I would get out a real score sheet, I would set up a real board, and I would make a move on the board before I put it into the computer. So those really helped. I think they helped my understanding of the Slav. And there were lots of ways that I could help prepare myself for these openings. So I think those are the really important parts. You have to be able to surprise somebody without taking too many risks. And you have to have a very solid base as an opening repertoire. And I think if you have that, then you're probably good. And then if you can maintain such a situation, then you're probably going to have a comfortable opening repertoire for a very long time, if not your entire life, which is really, really important in the current state of chess, where opening theory means so much. So again, just to review everything that I've gone over these last couple videos, you should look at top-level games and make sure that your opening appears in them, even if it's not the most common, now and then, so that it's at least approved by some 2700s. And then you should study it, play some speed chess with it, play some tournaments with it, and really stick with it, because then you won't have to prepare as much later on. You'll have a solid foundation, and even if somebody prepares a lot and has a position that could happen in the game on their computer before the game happens, you'll still be okay, because you know some of the key ideas and you know how to deal with different white tries. And I think that's the most important part of creating a solid opening repertoire. So with that in mind, I would suggest to anybody who's looking forward to making one, get started, and I wish you the best of luck. Thanks. This is Sam Shankland.